welcome back to PA Chalk Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have a different type of episode. We have an end of year Q&A. I posted up a questionnaire on my social media. I got a bunch of questions, and this is me going through and answering them. As a strength coach and a business owner, my time is quite limited. My favorite part about being a coach is the fact that I get to interact with athletes and be with athletes and really coach them. That's why I use TeamBuildr. I remember the days of searching for exercises, manually typing them in, and spending hours on spreadsheets and organizing my programs. This tends to be quite tedious and a lot of time consuming, which meant that I wasn't able to coach as much. So now for my business, TeamBuildr is a non-negotiable. It's an all-in-one programming platform that lets you create and deliver workouts to your athletes just in a few clicks. With TeamBuildr, I can customize programs, track athletes' progress in real time, and generate performance reports. My athletes get full ownership of their progress and can even share feedback on how they felt the session's going. Having this in place actually gives me more time to coach and be with my athletes. If you're ready to take your next step in your programming, give more time to your athletes, head over to teambuildr.com and use promo code PAChalkup, that's PACHALQUP, and start your 30-day free trial. The layout of this episode is going to be a little bit different, obviously, because there's no guest, but questions will pop up on the screen and then I will do my best to answer them. So the first question I got was what methods I used to program. So this is actually going to be broken down into a multi-part sort of answer. So what I mean by that is, again, I was mentored by Coach Ron McKeefery. He goes off principle-based rather than methodology-based. What that means is that instead of choosing one method and attacking the whole program with it, we look at all the different methodologies out there. We pick and choose what the best parts are for our athletes, for my current situation, and from there we make a best plan on how to attack their goals and their needs for their sport. In saying this, I do go off what Thomas Newman discussed in his book Developing the Athlete, is this sort of flexible periodization where you can again have this sort of undulating periodization, but within this undulation you've got space for, say, like your French contrast, your triphasic, your conjugate, your whatever it may be. You have space to sort of see what your athlete needs and sort of base that program off them. I did a podcast with Mike Boyle and we discussed this at great length, where he sort of looks at athletes and tries and identifies different buckets that they have, whether it's speed, strength, power, endurance, whatever they have got going on in their performance. We bucket these sections off and we need to think about what best bucket we should fill to help them perform for longer and better throughout their season. So say I have an athlete that comes in super strong, but he lacks power and speed. So I'm going to make sure that his strength is always topped up, but I will raise the speed and the power to make sure that I am creating this balanced athlete. Again, the episode I did with Dr. Shushamel was amazing because he discussed this sort of bell curve like programming methodology where you look at your athlete's season, you look at their current needs, and depending on where they sit within this curve is where they should go with the programming. So, for example, if we have someone that's just came out of injury, we're probably going to need to do some sort of triphasic where we're looking at isometrics, we're looking at eccentrics, we're looking at building that tendon stress. As they progress, we then go on to say like conjugate. As they get into their sport, we're sort of at the end of that bell curve and we're looking at French contrast. This is a very simplified method. If you want to get a full picture of what Tim said, go check that episode out. But it's sort of this great example of where they sit within this curve is where you should pick these principles from. Now, this is also then broken down into pre, during, and post season. Pre-season, you're going to need to build up a lot of resilience. Again, seasons are won in the preseason. What I mean by that is the more load you can stress them with, the more adaptations you can sort of achieve within this period, the better that they are going to be on season. Coach AJ has a great example where he looks at preseason as building an athlete's armor. So each week of the preseason, you sort of build onto this armor and build onto this armor. By the time that they get in season, you are aiming to maintain. Now, each the way that he explained it is you should look at an athlete and the armor that you built. Each game, you're dinking one whole armor line off, and our job within that season is to at least maintain or rebuild that line so that they can go through their whole season injury free and maintain a healthy body throughout. Now, again, I'm talking non contact injuries. Obviously, as soon as contact comes in, that's a little bit different because you can't control those. You can't prevent those. You can mitigate some of the onsets of it, but you can't prevent it. Non contact, you can sort of prepare a little bit more for, and this is what this sort of maintaining armor is like trying to achieve. Again, another point that I've just touched on is the load management aspect of in season. Now, I did a podcast with Steph Mock of Grubs now, and we got in depth about load management. Now, there's this conception now that load management should be low because we need to avoid burnout. But before we sort of really get into that and what it means for during the season, even preseason, postseason, we first of need to define it. So, load management in sports involves adjusting training volume, intensity, frequency, and duration to enhance performance, prevent injuries, and avoid overtraining. Now, the connotations with this sentence are negative. So, it's essentially saying we need to reduce everything that we're doing so that our athletes stay healthy, prevent injuries, avoid overtraining, whatever else. But load management has two systems. You do have the decrease, but you also have the increase. Now, a great example of this is when we're talking about athletes who are predominantly on the bench, they need to make sure that they are introduced to enough stimulus as the rest of the team that are playing. So, for example, if we talk about your main athlete gets injured, your backup needs to meet the same loads, the same sort of parameters that their counterparts are currently doing, right? So, by introducing the same loads with everyone, it ensures that when you're in this sort of injury part of your season where everyone's getting injured, you have players that can step in and perform just as good as the main players. When we're talking about preparing, we need to chase enough stimulus for their hardest game, and that usually entails taking them to the dark side. Now, Coach AJ is a beast when it comes to talking about the dark side. He puts it very, very clear and well. Your athletes need to experience this dark side so that when everything is going wrong in their game, everything is the hardest. They're playing the hardest opponents. They're done. They're fatigued. They're tired. Everything is going to shit. You still need those athletes to be able to come out and say, no, like I'm backing myself up. I have got this. Let's fucking go, because they have done the training. They have put in the time, the work to ensure that they are ready and they can perform at that level. So I also like to introduce my athletes to this sort of dark side of training so that they can have some self belief that they can come out of whatever the situation in their performance is. Now, during season, you sort of have to balance these loads so that, again, tying in the flexible periodization, the undulating method, you want to look at their easiest weeks are their hardest games, and their hardest weeks are their easiest games. And again, that's just to balance out the load. So, say I'm doing a super heavy week, that weekend's game is going to be a really easy game because we're supposed to be better than that team. Again, that's nothing on the team, it's just how these situations play out. So, I'm going to stress and increase their load so that when it comes to the game, their the amount that they do is good enough to keep that load on for the next week. So again, their hardest weeks, I'm going to ease off on the programming, ease off on the load, because I know they're going to work as hard as they can and hard as they possibly. Again, we're talking about volume, intensity, frequency, like the amount of parameters that we're looking into, they're going to do that and some. So it's looking at both sides of this load management coin, and it's decrease when need to, but increase when you also need to, and for who needs that load to be increasing. A great tip is after games, if your bench players didn't get that much time, make them run somewhat the distance that your on pitch players did. Again, if you've got GPSs, this is a great way to look at it. You can just plug in the GPS, check the data, and sort of ask your athletes to do the same. Measure out, be out there with them, and you can sort of ensure that this load is present for them. The second question that I was given is how I aim to command a weight room. Now, again, I've been fortunate enough to work at a Division One level where we're getting an hour tops with them in the weight room, then they have to move on. So a lot of my principles and a lot of my way of setting up the weight room and coaching them and commanding them is based on what I saw and what I took best from that situation. So no matter what sport, what athlete is in, I am going to be there half hour earlier. This is to ensure that there is enough setup time. Again, if the gym's mine, I can sort of do that the night before, ready for the day, and you can sort of just chop and change whatever needs. But I'm going to play the sort of both sides of this coin here. If you're in a public gym, half hour before. If it's your own thing, you can sort of just do the night before, but you're going to set up the weight room in a way that the exercises that you've got planned free flow. So, say we're squatting, we're then doing chin ups, and then we're doing some core. So, I would set up the barbell at the very first sort of posts, hook that. Your chin ups are then going to be on the outside, and then your core is going to be on the platform. So, you've got these three tiers, they just go through one, two, three. Your next set or pieces of equipment should already be set up either at the side of the rack or in front of the rack to make sure that this happens. So, say we've got like a three-tier system, four exercises in each tier. We have all the equipment in one rack or in one place, and we sort of just go one off the other. If you're in a public gym, this is going to be a little bit different and harder, but it's not impossible. If you are working in a gym where everyone knows you, you can sort of be like, hey, at some point in this session, I'm going to need this equipment. Is there a way that we can either work in with your set or have it free so that you can sort of, as soon as they get onto that, they jump on, they jump off. And it's again that communication with the public or with whoever else is in there to make sure that you can effectively go through the whole session smoothly. When it comes to my athletes, though, I am a big believer in fist bumps. If you are my athlete, you come in, you get a fist bump. The way that you give me that fist bump, I'm going to tell you how you're coming in today. If it's like a half-assed fist bump, it's I know there's something there, and I'm going to talk to you about it or try and approach you in a way that we can sort of have this discourse on what's happening within your day or what is currently putting you in a mood that's not ideal for what we're about to do. Again, I did an awesome episode. It was essentially two parts with Kelly and with Kelly, and we then did one with Brandon Shu, and we sort of discussed this dimmer type situation where you're going to try and match your athlete's energy, how they come in, and bring it to a level that you want. So if they're coming in super hype, you're going to again amp that and just sort of go off it. If they come in a shitty mood, you're going to like slowly raise that dimmer up so that you can then get them to perform for what they need. And another sort of aspect that I'm actively working towards is when I was interning under Coach Mac, he did this introduction to the program. He got all the athletes together, and he wrote he read a chapter from a book. Now, this is a very specific book, and I don't want to give it his secrets away, so I'm not going to divulge in that. But he got them together, read this chapter or read this extract from this book, and sort of that's how the session was led. From there, it sets up the mood for the whole session. This is something that I want to start introducing and really bring across in my sessions. It's just finding the right sort of time to introduce them. Another thing that I like to do is I like to make sure that my athletes and clients know that is an open door policy. If you are one of the athletes I coach, you can sort of come to me and talk to me about anything. It's not just a coaching role, it's we're here to sort of progress and build this human. So I'm going to want to know some of the information that you have going on. By doing this, it allows them to feel comfortable enough to talk to me when they do have hard days or when they do have great days. We can sort of fit our style to match that. Another aspect is when they come to me and approach me with an interest or a hobby that they have, I'm going to take time out of my day to then research into it so that when they talk to me about it, I can be as excited for them in this specific thing. So, for example, if one of your athletes is really into wood burning or kindling or any hobby that they might have, I'm going to do some research on it so that when they come to me and talk to me about it, we can sort of bounce off each other and I can talk to them and at least know what they're talking about. Again, I view Command of the Weight Room as how I shape the experience of my athletes to perform better and have longevity in their sport. So for me, I don't look at commanding, I look at leading and coaching the person that's in front of me. Again, awesome podcast I did with Coach Ray Zingler, and we sort of discussed that our athletes, our role is to sort of build humans. What I mean by that is give them the tools needed that if for some reason they don't end up at a pro level or getting paid for what they do and they have to work, they have the skills to be able to thrive and be just as good at that, if not better. So the third question I got is how I balance work, social media, life, training, family, and sleep. Now, there is obviously a lot to this question, and I'm going to try my best to answer it as thoroughly as possible. So, I will pick work to start off with. I am fortunate enough to also work with TeamBuildr, who is a sponsor of this podcast, and they are amazing at every sort of element of programming as possible. But more on that later. I also obviously run my own business, run my podcast, and again, I've got a million and one different hands on different pies. So, how do I manage this work that I am fortunate enough to do? The short answer is it is very hard. There is times that I overbook myself, and sometimes I'm running a little bit too thin on time for my own things and my own like training, life and family, sleep, social media. Like there's times that I have to cut something short or find different ways of finishing that task in different sort of ways. So I am actively trying to get better at the work life balance. So I can't say that I have any sort of real tips. What I can say is that when I'm looking at my day, I usually like to block time things. And again, allocating times to different tasks that I have. Sometimes it can go over, sometimes it can be shorter. So it's trying to find this balance of how long this task needs and how long I have to actually complete it. I also look at like if it's urgent, important, or if it's urgent but not important, if it's important but not urgent, and if I can delegate any of these tasks, I will try and do that. So for me, it's more of just identifying what needs done, what's the most important thing that needs done, blocking off that time, and then from there I can sort of finish these tasks. I'm also a big to-doer, so although I have this, I always have a to-do list and things keep getting added on and sometimes I'm not able to complete it. What I will say about not completing is sometimes you can't complete your whole to-do list. And I struggle with this a lot and I'm honest about it. Don't beat yourself up too much because you also have the next day. Training. Balancing training is hard, especially when sort of clients are coming in and I have an episode to film and TeamBuildr and I'm away on a conference or there's something happening. So for me, I actually find it easier to train when I'm at conferences. There's a gym there and I can sort of just go in and do this session wholeheartedly. What gets harder is when I'm back home and again I'm getting pulled in a million and one different ways, like work, family life, and just everything else that goes on. Sometimes I'm having to cut into my training time. And one of my goals for 2025 is to make sure that I allocate an hour to working out. I work out for that hour and nothing is interrupting that 1 hour. This is something that I'm actively trying to do in 2025. I will try different ways to sort of get myself accountable for that. Again, posting is a really good way of doing this. So I'm thinking of just posting my workouts and making sure that I have something either daily or weekly that will prove to people and to myself that I did do a workout that day. Life and family, that one is hard because I am someone that cares deeply for my life and my family. And I'm not always able to be as present as I want. And this is something that me and my fiance always talk about. And it's this thing where my head right now is I need to work as hard as I can so that in the future my family and I can be set and we can sort of spend more time with my kids and my fiance, who will at that point be my wife. So it's how I think, but I also forget to be present in this moment. And this is something again that I'm actively working on is being able to set time aside for my family and life where it's always I'm always on the go and there's always so much going on that I don't always have the chance to. So it's again, I'm trying to set up this time where weekends are for me and my fiance, and we do life together at that point. And during the week, I have my work hours. Weekend is just solely me and her and our dog. That's right there. Sleep. Now, this is a hard one because I do suffer from insomnia. I'm currently struggling to go back to sleep and stay asleep for long. I'll wake up in hour intervals. So again, I'm not going to bullshit here and say that I take XXX supplements and do this, do this, do this. I have tried them and they don't always help. So again, it's trying to find the right method for you that works. And again, more on this later, but Thorn the supplement company has melatonin, which again they test everything. They test the physical product and the packaging, so you know that everything's safe that goes into it. So I have bought supplements from them, and I'm actively taking them. So I will keep you updated on that, see if it works. Hopefully it does, because your boy needs sleep. Um, but it's just a case of, again, my head is racing all the time, so it's just making sure that I have everything set and planned, that when I get to bed I can just shut off. But even if my body is tired, my mind is tired, I can still stay up, and it's annoying, but again, it's sometimes where I come up with my best ideas. So again, having that notebook by your bedside really helps as well. But it's just sort of making sure that your recovery else, like everywhere else, is elite, so that your sleep, although plays a huge factor in your recovery, you can sort of mitigate some of those onsets through other recovery modalities. Again, I like a cold shower, I like a hot shower, so I do contrast in that way. I have massage guns, I have physios at my disposal, so I can sort of tap into them. I have everything else fine, so that's sort of how I'm able to do everything. But it is still a work on for, it's just a constant work on. Social media is again one of the shittest things I have to do in my job. I personally don't like social media, but I'm in a space where I have to use it, and I have to constantly be active on it to make sure that everything sort of grows and is on pace with everything that I want to do for this year and next. So, what I tend to do is I tend to schedule a lot of my things. I have a great app called Opus, and it sort of takes my podcast, chops it down, and gives me clips that I can use. So at that point, it's just typing in a description, putting a thumbnail, and shipping it out, and making sure that that goes up at the point that it does. When it comes to social media posts, like single posts, again, everything is scheduled. I just make sure that everything is tagged and everything is ready. And as soon as it goes out, that's live. I put it on my story, and it just goes out. I also use Canva, and that's been a blessing. So what happens is Canva has these templates. I input my branding, my imagery, everything that sort of my brand is, and I type in the information. From there, I can also just schedule it from Canva, and that's it. Like it is, it's very time consuming, but having these two apps really does help with giving myself more time back, if that makes sense. Fourth question that I was given is, if I could give one piece of advice to a new coach, what would it be? Now, this is a question that I ask every guest on the podcast. And like many other coaches, my biggest advice is look for the right mentor for you and where you want to be in the future. There's no point chasing logos, there's no point chasing names. If you want to be a specific coach, you have to seek the help from the coaches that are already doing it. They're already at that place, because they're going to mitigate some of the sore points, the growing pains that they went through, and help and guide you throughout your whole time. Now, not all coaches will be wanting this responsibility or interested in it. So if they say no, do not take it to heart. It's more on them than it is you. So again, I was fortunate enough to be able to be mentored by Coach Ron McKeefery, and he has helped me ever since. Like, you should also look at this mentor as a lifelong mentor, as opposed to just a mentor for that time and that's it. So when we're looking at what next steps, they can sort of guide you. They can tell you their thoughts, and you can weigh up what you feel and what they're saying, and make an informed decision on that. The second piece of advice that I would give to new strength coaches is talk to as many coaches as you can. Again, this podcast is awesome because I get to connect and build these rapports and connections with coaches from all over the world. while I'm still learning and still looking at different ways that I can build onto this path of mine. A great example of this is I once watched an NSCA conference, and at the end of this presentation, the speaker had no references. And to me at that time, I was like, hold on, like, why? Like, you're claiming some big things. Like, why is there no references? Why? Like, you're not essentially backing anything up. Like, what's going on here? And it's not until I started speaking to coaches and sort of being mentored by different people and sort of engaged in these industry conversations that I realized that research isn't the end all be all. It's a great foundation start. It's great to start. But where the value is how coaches interpret these methods, these principles, these whatever it may be, and how they apply it. Are they having success with it? Because sometimes in research you can't apply it to any athlete. It's just something that I got researched. Either it worked for them or it didn't. It also depends on who you have in front of you. Not all methods are going to be for every athlete. So it's again, if you speak to coaches and again, even if you completely disagree with them, you can learn from that as you can put yourself in their position and check as to why they're doing it. Again, I speak to hundreds of coaches, and if they're coming up me with a specific methodology or principle or whatever it may be, and I disagree, I don't combat them on it. I try and figure out why they're saying this and why it works for them or why they like using it. So a great question to have is like, what is their current circumstances? What are their athletes and why is this working? Why is it good for them at that time? That's a good way to approach industry conversations because again, each athlete is different, each program is different, each coach will require different outcome for every athlete. So you kind of have to take this coaching and methodology and not be egocentric on it, just free flowing and sort of figure out why it's happening that way for them and what successes you can take from for your program. Again, this next question is sort of coming off the end of that, and the best resources that I can recommend to people for further knowledge and to further your career is exactly what I've just mentioned: is speaking to coaches and speaking to different sort of professionals in this industry and figuring out what elements that they consider to be important and how you can apply it to your program. Say you're speaking to a physiotherapist or a psychologist, a biomechanist, a physiologic, physiologist, whatever the word is, you can sort of at least recommend them to the right people, or you can recommend them based on what you know that works. Again, if I have any PT questions, I shoot them straight across to Josh Chung. Like, he is phenomenal. Any question, I go to him. Nutrition, Ali, and psychology, Kelly. Like, I trust them so much that if I have any question, that's who I go to straight away. Like, I try and get to the bottom of what their thoughts is, and if I can't do anything about it, all I can do is recommend them to the right people. And that, as a coach, is your biggest knowledge sort of fountain is other coaches and other professionals within the performance industry. Second last question: companies I would recommend people look into. Now, there's a different categories to this. Programming software, I have to go TeamBuildr. We're sponsored by them and I work for them as well. So any programming needs, go to TeamBuildr, use promo code PAChalkup and get yourself a 30-day free trial. This is great because they are constantly coming out with new sort of software add-ons and better ways to ease your programming so that you can actually spend more time with your athletes. Again, like, I'm a coach that likes to be there for my athletes, so going on Excel and spending hours and hours and hours on programming and sheets and whatever else, that to me just doesn't work. So TeamBuildr, I just have everything on the software, program, drop downs, everything's there so that I can just go and put it down, copy paste, whatever it needs done, and that's it. VBT, there's two companies that I would recommend if you're in a high end position where you can actually spend some money on VBTs. I would definitely go Perch. They're phenomenal. They sponsor the podcast, so I also have to give them a big shout out. The way that they work, they also do jump performance. They do like body, like without barbell, bar pass. They do everything. So they are a great one if you've got some money to spend, and they are the golden standard. My second VBT is Output Sports. I have personally not bought a device, but I have used them in the past, and I really like their custom testing phases. So like you can create tests and sort of figure out what you want to do and test and make sure that they hold the platform where you can actually do this with. I kind of touched on it, but two companies that are really good for their jump performance is Hockey Dynamics and Plyomat. I have two Plyomats right there, and I honestly love them because they're easy, they're quick. Again, if you've got specific things that you need to test, Hockey Dynamic all the way. If you need to be quick about it and test a lot of athletes, Plyomat is perfect. They're accurate. There was a study done by Springfield College. Adam Feit, Mike Boyle used them, and they are great and accurate for what it is. Supplements, again, I have a love hate relationship with supplements. The supplements that I'm recommended are tested for athletes, and that's the only thing that I will ever take or advise or tell people about. First one is bulk powder black label. I have been using them since 2016, and any supplements that I need quick, like proteins, creatines, I go to them. They're cheap enough and they are tested for athletes. So I will always say bulk powders. I kind of mentioned them before. Thorn Supplements is a new company that I'm trialing out, and I've actually ordered their electrolytes and melatonin, like I mentioned before, and that's a company that I'm sort of looking actively into. Again, when I'm advising on companies that people should look at, one, I look for golden label products. I want it to be accurate for what I'm testing and make sure that everything that it says on the box that it should say should do, it does, and it does well. The second thing is I look at company values and ethos. That to me is a big thing. If I'm advising coaches to look into and buy, I want to make sure that it is the best for what they need because at the end of the day, I gave my word that this product is good and I want my word to mean something. So I will only give you advice on equipment that I personally have used. These next two sort of tiers I have looked into. One I will not mention, but it's a good one. But I don't particularly like the company values and what they do, so I'm not going to mention them. Speed gates is what I'm talking about. For speed gates, again, the need is there. Dasher is okay. I've looked a bit into them and they seem to be accurate. I've not tried them, so I can't say 100% go for it. It's accurate, do it. But they're at least a good company, and I have spoken to the founder, and I like their company ethos. I don't particularly know what the equipment is like because I've never tested it. GPS units, I will always go Stat Sports. They're friendly. They're always very customer centric. So any questions that you have, they will answer very quickly. I've only used Stat Sports a handful of times, so I can't dive deep into the pros and cons. But it's a good company and it's accurate for what it says on the tin. Now the goals for 2025. This is another question I got, which is what is my goals for this coming year? Again, I'm wanting to expand this business, and coaching being at the forefront of what I do. I want to spend more time with my athletes and coaching and really being active in this coaching role. So for me, it's always looking at what best I can do and how many more athletes I can bring onto the program. I'm also obviously very interested in keeping on building this podcast and sort of where else I can go. My main focus is to always connect the whole industry. So I'm actively looking for coaches all over the world to come by and spend an hour with me and talk about programs and wherever else. So again, my expansion is always to speak to more coaches. This podcast is going to have a further two branches. One is coming out in January, so at the weekend that this episode releases should be the first episode of PA Chalk Up the Breakdown. And because I'm fortunate enough to go to conferences, I get to speak to the speakers of these conferences. So what I've done is I've taken them aside for 10 to 30 minutes, discussed their presentation in depth, and sort of see where else you can go from their presentation, like the practical application of their presentation. The second branch, I can't talk about it yet. It is very exciting, and there's a bit of traveling, so it's again how I manage my time. My time will significantly be reduced because of it, but it's fun, it's exciting. Not been done in this industry before, so look out for it. It will be out soon. Okay, I lied. There's one potential branch coming up as well that I'm excited to look for to talk about. I can't talk about it yet because it's not started nor has it fully sort of been spoken about properly, but it will be fantastic when it comes out. It's again bringing that practical application into what we do. I will also be aiming to put on more events that coaches can learn from. There is again, I always look for the twist, the something that's not been done before. So my coaching education in 2025, I am hoping that it goes into more in person and more specialized for what we can actively do in this industry. So everything that coaching that I put out coaching education wise will have an element of professionalism. There's practical in there. There's things that we can take into the real world and have real value for what we do. I look for these high value situations. So anything that I put out is going to be in that realm. Again, I'm conscious that these things take time. So I'm not going to say specific times just yet, but look out for it. There will be more this year. Now, we've finished, we've done. One more thing, strength and conditioning coach of the year in PA Chalk Up. I have to announce this because it's something that I want to start. And the 2024 coach of the year goes to Thomas Newman. He broke every metric that I had previously set, and it's still climbing. It's still doing the numbers. So, big shout out to Tom. This was a great episode, and again, we spent 3 hours. So the fact that it's still the highest and the most watched and the most liked is wild because me and him just spoke for 3 hours, and that was it was one of those that I didn't know what was going to happen because it was 3 hours, but it's ended up being the number one episode of the year. So if you've enjoyed this episode, leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts and feelings on what I discussed, if my tips were handy, if you're looking to put them in place, or different ways that you do things that I might not be doing. If you know a better way, let me know down below as well. And yeah, peace.